All right, we are live with Allen Mueller from Emissary. Allen, how's it going?
It's great, Randy. Thank you so much for having me. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. Certainly excited for it. You set for the holidays, or still need to do more?
We're getting there. We're getting there. Luckily I have two teenage daughters, so they can do a little driving, a little wrapping, a little shopping, a little food prep for me. So I'm lucky. I've got two good elves on my side. Working motherhood and all of that.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited for the next hour here. Allen is the CEO of Emissary, a company that's a sponsor of Sales Community, and a company I've been working with. Super impressive, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But been certainly impressed. Also working with Allen. She's a great executive leader, exceptional coach, a steward of talent, I would say as well, from seeing the team. But why don't, instead of hearing from me, why don't you maybe go through a little bit of your background?
Great. Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me again. Allen Mueller, I'm the CEO of Emissary, and I've spent, 30 years or so, which I probably shouldn't admit to that number at this point, but I've spent, my entire career really in the sales and the go-to-market space. So I was an SDR, my first job out of college. Did that for a couple of years, so we can compare war wounds to anyone with that. And I was an account manager. I was carrying a bag, full quota carrier. I've been a leader across teams, worked in the sales enablement space, sales performance space. And so I've seen kind of every vector of sales and account management over my career, and started with Emissary 2 years ago, and have enjoyed this incredible ride as I look at Emissary and think, wonder where it was my whole career, where I was trying to hit my own personal quotas. Right.
Yeah, that's great. And you also was kind of impressive. You probably learned a lot with CEB and Miller Hyman as well.
Yeah, both incredible experiences. So I was with the corporate executive board for about 17 years before they were sold to Gartner, and led most of the commercial team as we grew from $5 million to $110 million or so, supporting IT executives, which was an incredible experience, launching 40 or so products across that time, and just learned so much. Brilliant colleagues and a great growth story. And then went to Miller Hyman. Started working in the sales performance and the methodology space, which felt like it kind of dovetailed to what I had been doing as a sales leader, and ran their global sales team, the CRO for their global sales team, which was upwards of 300 or so sellers globally.
Wow, that's great. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about Chief, which is a private networking group for women.
Yeah. Right? Oh, good question. Yeah, great. I would love to talk about Chief. So for anyone that isn't aware, Chief started maybe a couple of years ago. I got involved at the beginning of this last year as they launched their DC cohort. So Chief is all about supporting women's ascent to leadership roles. So whether you're trying to climb a corporate ladder from a female perspective, or you have made it up the corporate ladder, or somewhere along the way on the corporate ladder, it's all about providing kind of network support to other women through a cohort experience that's generally regionally based. So I work with a cohort in New York, and so I'm connected once a month with women, sharing best practices and everything else around career, board seats, managing across the matrix, communications, all of those things that I think are hard for anyone, but I think are particularly pertinent for women for a bunch of different reasons. And it's just been an incredible experience. Having gotten to the CEO role, I kind of had this moment of like, what's in it for me, right? Which, I think everybody has to think about as they consider where they spend time. And at the end of the day, I really did want to focus on working with other women as they think about that ascendancy, but also things that I've learned and things that I've thought about in my kind of leadership persona, how I think about our growth and my own personal development. So it's been an incredible experience. And I would highly recommend, whether it's something like this or something else, getting involved in that community outside of the your core workspace. I'm shocked at how much value I've gotten from a personal perspective.
That's great. Any kind of tips or best practices that you would share just around the broad topic of not just women, but even just kind of diversity in general, especially in sales?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I've really focused on this with Emissary. We are a very diverse team, a diverse leadership team. We've focused on diversity and inclusion, well before it was kind of trendy, I would say. And I would say, I think 30 to 40% of our organization is kind of non-white, non-traditional roles. So I'm really proud of that. And I think one of the things that we focused on is looking in non-traditional places for hires and looking for traits that people have as opposed to kind of specific experience. And we also really focus on diversity from our hiring committee or hiring groups so that we make certain that we don't have some preconceived bias or what have you as we think about candidates that are coming in. So I think the diversity of where you look, the consideration of traits as much as experience, and also diversity in your hiring committee has really worked well for us. And I think that's part of our success and part of why we're growing so well.
That's great. I mean, so over the years, some of the best, sales reps, sales leaders, for sure are women. And, a lot of companies I find are trying to, kind of nurture that cohort, but, there's only so many that you have, whether it's the women or diversity or whatever. You gotta watch what I say. But I think it's really going back into the college ranks and say, okay, there's 30 colleges. And I've spoken to people who do sales at the sales program at Alabama, at FSU.
Yeah.
And I think kind of pulling the kind of whole spectrum of sales back into the college ranks. So that way then.
Which I love. Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's been a debate for a long time of like, is sales art or science? Right. So that's been a big debate. And now, there's a growing camp of which I'm one of them, really believe in the science of sales. Like if you look at methodology and folks that follow sales process and whatnot, like I fully believe in the science. So I love that that's being taught more from a scientific methodology perspective in the academic circles. I do think there's still some art to it. And, and I think that where I've seen, not to specifically call this out for women, but where I've seen people be successful is, that ability to listen with empathy and all those other things, which are the traits that I was talking about that are less about, what you're taught, but it's more about kind of your DNA and who you are. And I think it's great to get that balance between an academic, scientific perspective, but also, looking for those traits of empathy, listening, all that other stuff that I think is as important.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the two broad topics that we're going to be talking about today is kind of what you see or what we see in changing in sales for 2022, and also what does sales intelligence mean. Before we kind of dive in on there, just want to remind anybody that is watching, feel free to ask any questions, post any comments that you want. We have Tucker behind the scenes pulling any of those questions in. So always encourage everybody to do that. So as we talk about sales in 2022, maybe as a lead in, what do you see around the kind of selling and the buying process? Or maybe it should be the buying process evolving the sales process.
Yeah, great question. And again, I think I can speak with a little bit of authority from experience here too, right? So, when we go back to my early days when I was at the advisory board and Blackboard and the corporate executive board, I sold to a person, right? So my marketing team bought lists, right? And I could call them and, you go in at 8:00 in the morning because you try and get around the admin, right? And that's how you could reach your buyer. And it was a very linear process, right? You would sell to a person who had a need and they were a decision maker. And, sometimes we would email them terms and conditions, right? And they just email you back and you're off and running, right? So that world we know has been gone for a long time, right? And what we've seen, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, and everybody knows this, but it's profound in what it's the impact to the selling process is, no longer you have that one person, obviously. There's this committee. You sometimes know who's on the committee making decisions. You often don't. You don't know how they're evaluating things. You don't know what their priorities are or their preconceived notions or how they're going to evaluate your services or offerings. And a lot of times, we would see people who still tend to focus on selling to that one buyer and let that buyer do their selling internally for them, right? What we would call single threaded. And you never want someone else to do your selling for you internally, right? And so we've gotten trapped in selling to one individual. We know the buying process has changed and gotten more complex. But, even at the end of the day, we don't even understand how to navigate procurement, right? So the evolution of the procurement function and trying to understand how you navigate the power and the influence procurement might have on your deal. All of those vectors have changed dramatically, certainly since I did it, 20 or so years ago, but definitely even in the last few years. And so what we focus on is kind of that buying process is how it's evolved. Your selling process has to change as well, obviously, right? Because you can't, it's not a linear, one conversation discussion anymore. And that's changed. And you have to make certain your buyer actions are pacing with your selling actions, right? And that they're taking steps on their end to pace with you in order to, get the deal done or, navigate the organization.
Yeah. So in that kind of selling process, let me ask my question, then we'll go to Nathan's. So that kind of selling process, then what do you see as kind of changing, more evolving if you're talking to a team of sales reps as an example?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think, again, understanding that buying process is what has evolved as much as anything, and having confidence of the impact of your solution. Like, again, it used to be all about, here's what I can do for you. And the conversation that's changed is understanding the what's in it for them, understanding their personal needs, we used to call it the win behind the win, or whatever, the need behind the need, right? And understanding that from a personal perspective to everyone that you're trying to sell to, knowing that there are more buyers involved in that decision is really critical. So you can't rely on the feedback or the guidance of one person. You might have a great coach, which is amazing. Like, we love when we have that in a selling process. But you also don't want to, as I was saying, don't want to depend on that one individual to navigate those conversations for you. So I think that's one of the biggest changes. And then how that's changing how sellers spend time. It's changing how sellers collect information about those organizations and what information is vital as you think about navigating all of those steps and kind of the ins and outs of the roller coaster of getting a deal done.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go to Nathan's question. Nathan, nice hair there. Curious, what do you continue to love about sales? Allen, from SDR to CRO to CEO is a huge journey.
Yeah, good. It's a great question. I think at the end of the day, I believe sales is all about improving the performance of individuals and organizations. And there's some greater mission. Like, obviously you want to hit quotas, you want to perform, you want to drive growth and all those other great things, right? But that's a byproduct to me of the effects and the impacts that you have on humans and on businesses. Mm-hmm. And I think I've always connected to the outcomes of what we were selling and understanding the impact and the business drivers for the organizations that I've sold to and worked with, because when it was about their performance, I did really, really well. When it was about my performance, I think I struggled more. And keeping that in mind, I think that's always driven my kind of passion for it, because I think it's amazing to watch the impact of what you're doing, whatever it is that you're selling or offering, and seeing the impact and the trajectory that you can change for those people and those organizations. That's like a really powerful mission to me, that I really believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that always maybe too short-sighted, but one of the things that always excited me about sales, there's always that kind of next.
Yeah. I mean, I love the thrill of the hunt and the chase. Like, I love probably got a little ADHD in here where I love working across multiple different things all the time, right? I love that because, there is the day looks different every day, which I always have appreciated. I also love the strategy of it, where you're trying to navigate, understand, try and figure out what is the motivation and drives people. Like, I love that human psychology of it. So I think all of that fits together. But certainly you got to be motivated to win. You got to be goal oriented, all of that other stuff. Right. Yeah. But that's kind of table stakes. I think in order to be successful, you also have to have the other pieces.
Yep, absolutely. Nathan, thanks. And
great question.
Any others watching, feel free to, again, to chime in with any comments or questions, especially. So what about the crazy sales and marketing tech stack space? You go back, I mean, if I go back, whatever, wow. Maybe we're naive, but, kind of 5 years ago, 10 years, maybe 10 years ago is really, you had Salesforce and LinkedIn were kind of the main things.
Yeah.
And now you have kind of hundreds or thousands. I think Gartner calls it the summer of sales tech mayhem.
Summer of mayhem. Exactly. So it's a great question. And it's really fun to watch, right? From being an insider, but also being kind of a student of the space. Years ago, however many years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, it was a category of one, really. I mean, it was about CRM, and that was the alpha category. And, that's still important. But now if you look across the entire sales tech stack space, just in the sales space, there are 45 different categories, right? So this explosion across investments, across technology enablement and everything else has been incredible to watch. And this last summer, it was titled the Sales Tech Mayhem, right? Where we see organizations from the capital market perspective and organizations from a buying perspective really pour money into trying to think about how they solve for the problem we were just talking about, right? The buying process has changed. It's gotten more complex. And it's really, really difficult to navigate. And everyone is trying to pour money into how to solve that problem, both from a technology perspective, but also an enablement angle, because you're all about the efficiency of your sales team, right? So how do I improve the velocity of my pipeline, the performance of my sellers? And so these technology firms have just rushed in to try and support that that evolution. And what we're seeing, which I'm really excited about, both from again a student of the space, but also from an emissary perspective, is these ecosystems that are forming that are kind of fun to watch. It is fun to watch, obviously, the capital market pour in. So if you look at what just happened with Lucia, and now their valuation is $1.5 billion or so from a sales intelligence perspective. So it's fun to watch all that happen, but the kind of an organic shift in what's happening with these ecosystems, where organizations are aligning themselves, and some of them have done a really great job. So Henry originally started with ZoomInfo and has grown, or originally started with Discover.org and grown that behemoth of ZoomInfo, has done an amazing job of both creating an ecosystem, but also investing in an ecosystem, because buyers are looking for, they don't want to shop across 45 categories. They are looking for someone that helps them navigate. And so as we see that, that explosion, the growth, the evolution, it's really fun to watch. And there's tremendous opportunity for an organization like Emissary, but it's just incredible to watch, again, the money people are pouring in from a development, from an investment, and from a buying perspective. It's incredible.
Yeah, and the whole kind of just around sales methodologies, whether you medic,
Yeah.
or others. I mean, just to your point in terms of the science of selling, just all these different challenge, everything, all these other methodologies that are out there.
Yeah. And I really do feel for someone, that's in the sales enablement space. And keep in mind, the enablement space is a really relatively new function, right? It used to be rev ops or sales ops, right? And they were managing territories and quotas. And then more and more, they were asked to start to manage these technologies, right? So then they took on Salesforce, and that felt natural. But then think about all of these other, opportunities that have started to evolve in that space. And so, enablement has really shifted in how they're focusing between, engagement, enablement, and ops. And I feel for these buyers, because it's become such a crowded space. And so the need for these ecosystems as organizations, you want to think about, how do I buy multiple solutions? Because no one organization is going to solve everything for you. You need to have, pieces of and parts of a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of this. A lot of CROs I talk to, they say just crazy, this tech stack that we have. And I just mentioned, for those, I'm sure you're familiar, but so those watching that may not, some of the different categories, and I'll mention ones that are obviously involved in sales community, pretty much leaders. But Gong kind of started with this conversational intelligence, recording calls. Now that's the kind of revenue intelligence space. You've got outreach, kind of the whole sales engagement side. On the ABM side, you have a Sixth Sense, a Terminus, a Demand Base. You've got some, I'd say, some nichier people, so around kind of the whole concept of value selling, which is important. So Decision Link and the value selling from a platform perspective, and even some kind of new age training companies. So a Sales Impact Academy that's great, kind of online, and best practice teachers.
Good stuff.
The whole gifting. So a Sendoso, which is I call it swag, but they just raised money at a $650 million valuation, I think. Some very boutique high-end consultants, like an Alexander Group, who can help around not just comp but org and other designs. Dooley help save time on kind of Salesforce and some other areas, and the list kind of goes on and on. The whole notion of kind of contacts and emails, whether it's a ZoomInfo, a Seamless. Jesse, who's on our team, has some cool tools around Lead Magic and Lead Enrich. But it just that's just kind of a small sampling. But there's just, this goes on and on.
Yes.
So you have to think there's got to be some consolidation or something that's going to come together.
Yeah.
Right.
Or consolidation or alignment, right? Because you've got to make it easy for the buyers to figure out how this all fits together, right? So that's where I was saying I feel for, whether it's a CRO or heads of enablement, trying to fit all this together and manage the change process for the adoption to be successful, right? So as we all know, you just can't, ram that stuff through. You've got to make sure you're thoughtful about the adoption and the change management and how it all fits together, because sellers, again, it's all about the efficiency for the sales time, right? And we know that there's too much kind of administrivia tedium in those roles. And so thinking about how you augment that, not drain it, is really, really important from a change management perspective.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And you talked some, but maybe you kind of expand on it. I mean, when I was in operating roles, you had kind of the sales ops function. I'd argue most of the time it would be, I would always be upset because I don't need to know what already happened. I'd say, I don't want to, I care a little bit about the rear mirror. I care more going forward.
Yeah.
And now this whole kind of rev ops function. Can you talk a little bit about that some more?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's the evolution that, RevOps now is doing more of the operational sales, like, right, the operations, whereas enablement is what people really were looking for. Like, help me be better at the job. Like, a lot of the functional stuff that you see from sales ops is still really, really important. And some of these roles blend in organizations, right? But you need to make sure you're managing territories, you're managing Salesforce, permissions and all of those things, you're managing comp plans and all of that. Like, that's vitally important for the operations of an organization. But the enablement space is really where you change the trajectory of the sales efficiency, right? And those are the folks that are increasingly more owning the budget and making some of these buying decisions as they think about how new offerings fit into their ecosystem. And so from a seller perspective, it's no longer just about the solution that you have and the value proposition from your solution, which you got to be really crisp on, right? My old days, it was just like, let me tell you what we got. And someone would buy something and maybe they knew what they bought, maybe they didn't, right? We've gone to where, like, you obviously are all value selling, solution selling, which is great. Like, assuming that you're there, you really do need to understand the ecosystem in which that organization operates, the context that they operate, because you've got to help them think through how your solution fits into the other things that they're doing. And so you really have to be well-versed in, I don't want to even call it the competition, because a lot of these do different things. So, they're not directly competitive, but you're definitely competing for budget. You're competing for sales, focus and time, and you're competing for that shelf space in that enablement process, right? In their methodology. So understanding, not only you have to be well-grounded, as I said, not only in your own offering and the value proposition, but how it augments and fits into the other pieces of their ecosystem in order to be successful. It's hard. That's really challenging, right? But fun, fun if you love the game of it, I guess.
Yeah. It's amazing. And then the kind of this whole expanding role on the CRO side of things, right? Where it used to be just, it was it was a lot to do, just kind of VP of sales, but then now it's broader go-to-market, marketing, and some others. What do you see with that?
Well, I mean, that is a really, really great question. I hadn't really stopped to think about it a ton before you and I got on the call here. But, it used to be that the CRO was the best salesperson, right? They were the chief seller for the most part, right? Because when you had the biggest deal, that's who you wanted to come in, right? They flew in with you. It was executive presence. We're committed to the deal, right? Like, that's what the CRO used to be about. And that's, that's still important. Like, everybody still does that. But you think about the evolution of that role, right? It used to be very linear, right? Manage the sales team, hit the quota, manage these big deals, whale hunting, whatever you want to call it. But now the CRO sits in the middle of and is the intersection, and I've always said this, or for a long time said this, the intersection of everything the organization is doing. So whether it's from a product perspective, marketing, operations, what have you, the CRO now sits in the middle of all of those. So you are a key business partner internally in ways that maybe you've never been before. I look back on my years and, think about the power that the sales team wielded in product strategy, and how reckless we could be on just, providing feedback based on the last call that you had and the last customer that asked for something. And so being a really thoughtful from a product perspective or go-to-market perspective or marketing or all those others is really, really important. And so I've seen this evolution of the CRO where it's much more, I guess it now in a lot of organizations sits at the right hand of the CEO, not that anyone else doesn't, but this evolution and escalation in value and impact for the CRO. And it's incredible to watch. And what I've also seen, which is fun for me personally, having been a CRO and moving into a CEO role, the move from CRO to CEO isn't as big a jump as it might have been because of the exposure that so many CROs have across marketing, operations, and everything else. And it just feels very natural. And I think we're seeing that more and more and more, which I think is great.
Yeah. So Troy Tyner says, yes, impact, integration, and economics. Thanks, Troy. Good to see you. Feel free to ask a question too,
great
Troy.
Point. Yeah, I agree.
What about, and it's okay to disagree with me. We can agree to disagree. So the concept of marketing reporting to sales, I'm a big proponent that I think it needs to, and my reasons are that, controlling that OpEx envelope and forcing that kind of ROI. And I know people say, well, marketing can play nice and work well with sales, but you think about MQLs, SQLs, and it's fine for you to disagree. So my belief is marketing should report into sales. What do you think?
Yeah. So I'm going to respectfully agree and disagree at the same time, if that's okay.
Perfect.
I think it really depends on the maturity of those functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on the maturity of the organization. I certainly have seen it work well and really believe in kind of the church and state between marketing and sales, and how, depending on the sales leader and the, like I said, maturity of the sales function, how responsible they can be in driving marketing strategy. I think that works really, really well when that works well. But I've also seen that be irresponsible, right? And reckless on how you think about prioritization and strategies and everything else. So if you've got maturity of function and maturity of leaders and maturity of the organization, it certainly can report in. And I've seen great, success there. I also love when I've worked in a matrix and felt like they were like my peer and equally responsible for delivering that number, as opposed to, contributing to delivering that number, which feels a little adjacent. I think people think that marketing has to sit in sales in order to feel like they own the number. And I think they can be adjacent to sales, and it's up to the CEO or whomever those report to make them equally accountable for that number, both from a comp perspective and a reporting perspective. And, how you give attribution to the success of the company, right? I think that's really important. So I won't lobby for one or the other. I think I've moved it in and out depending on, like I said, all those other variables. And I don't think there's one size that would fit all for anyone.
Yeah, I talked to, wish I could remember who won CRO this week, and it was the first time I heard that marketing was actually taking responsibility for 30% of his number.
Great. And I've heard that more and more, like, marketing has to be responsible for delivering the outcomes, right? Yeah. And, if they're doing things well and the pipeline of, SQL to MQL or MQL to SQL is flowing, then, they argue that they're doing their job well. So that's why I feel like it's helpful to have mutual accountability, right? Because you can track them again now with some of the technology that we have, that we can track the velocity of the pipeline and those leads and the deals. It's a little bit easier, but mutual accountability is the name of the game. However you structure it, compensate for it, organize for it, people you put around it, like, it's the mutual accountability that I think is the important piece.
Yep, absolutely. And as we're kind of still talking about sales as it evolves in 2022, I think the concept of branding is important. There's a executive friend, Ken Doherty, who's at Dell, and he always says, know me, like me, trust me. And for me, when I break that down, I think about, okay, the trust is, it's something that's proven over time. You're going to listen, you're going to care, you're going to respond. And that, kind of brand, trust, credibility, whether it's customers or partners or people you work with or you compete against, kind of that is, I think, all the more important these days. What do you think about when you talk about brand in sales?
Brand in sales from that know me, trust me evolution. Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that's why, I don't know if this is directly answering your question, but I think that's why you see this ascendancy of, account management sellers, right? Where it's like, everyone's like, are you a hunter or a farmer? Right. And maybe you're one or the other, and there's certain attributes to each one, but at the end of the day, it's about account growth, right? And there's important attributes to both. And we've seen this evolution of kind of account management roles where that is a lot about the trust me, because that's part of where that gets delivered. And when you get folks that are really, really great at the selling BD component, but also can build in the trust me and let me show you, and I'm going to, deliver this over time. That's where you really do get brand and individual loyalty, I think. But those lines are blurring a lot from the old days of the hunter farmer roles, right? Which I think is fun to watch from a, seller perspective.
Totally. So next question is, we're still talking about 2022, and I'll go first. So besides the whole sales intelligence aspect, which is vital and important, we'll talk about shortly, I'm going to ask, pick 3 areas that you think are vital for 2022. And I'll go first. We already talked about one with just the tech stack. I think whether you're a SDR, sales leader, CRO, just kind of, leveraging that tech stack and the kind of the science and analytics behind that is vital. And we already talked about that. Next is, I'd say, taking advantage of the face-to-face advantages. And, there's, some companies I see that have these policies, you can't do face-to-face. I'd say most of the CROs that I talk to are on planes, they're going around, they're seeing customers, customers want to be seen.
Yeah.
So I think those that can have a, early mover advantage in doing face-to-face, obviously you have to be safe and healthy, but that's huge. And then the third piece I'd say is just the sales basics, which, have been around for, whatever, I guess I'm been around 35 years or so, but I think about, kind of focusing on who you're going to sell to, what's your value how are you qualifying in order to know your value proposition? So if you're selling, how can you really, know enough and have the customer bought in on the value side to say, how are you going to help generate revenue? How are you going to help them save money? Are you doing when you go into meetings, do you have an agenda, for the sales call, who's going to say and do what, are you setting up the next meeting? And there's all, laundry list of things that come into play. So, my answer to the three top things are the tech stack, taking advantage of the face-to-face side, and continue to do the sales basics.
I would agree with all those. I would agree with all those. The couple of things that I would probably add to that, I think I definitely agree with the sales tech stack space. The other two that I would probably throw in here as vitally important, especially now for most organizations, is your hiring and your onboarding strategy, right? So everyone is competing for talent. We see people jumping for, $10,000 here, more equity there, more opportunity, whatever it might be. So that frenzy that everybody is feeling is real. And there's no reason to believe that stops across 2022. We'd like to believe that settles down where people start to have to demonstrate kind of performance and role, right? And have to have some consistency in performance to be rewarded. But I think that whole hiring challenge, I think, will continue into 2022. And it's interesting because it's not just the hiring profile, but it is also how you think about the speed to productivity of your people, right? So knowing that a certain percentage of your sales team or commercial team might turn over, how do you make certain that your speed to productivity and your enablement is as thoughtful as possible so that if it took you 6 months to get someone up and running, you're doing it in 60 days, right? And so I think it tucks in with the sales tech stack that we were talking about, but it's a lot about how do you enable them really thoughtfully so that they're able to be efficient and successful as quickly as possible. Because the risk that you have for an organization, obviously, is that, they don't perform quickly. But given the velocity of the space right now, if you have sellers that aren't producing and feeling like they're being successful, they are going to jump for the next thing if you're not making sure that you're supporting them in their success, right? So how you think about quota attainment, how do you think about compensation, how you think about hiring and enablement, I think is vital for organizations as they go into 2022. I don't think it's going to be the same process that we've lived before. I could see a space where we start to do rolling planning in a way that's very, very different from sales because things are different quarter by quarter. So I would say that's one of the big ones, kind of hiring, staffing, and enablement. The other one that I would say, I do agree with you on the face-to-face perspective. I mean, clients still want to see each other. I've still been traveling, you're as careful as you can. And I think for, as much for the relationship as it is the energy of your teams to be out and see someone, it's lifeblood to be out with clients and to sit across from someone. To go back to what I was talking about earlier, to see the impact and understand the context in which they're operating. It's really hard to get that from a Zoom meeting, right? So you walk into an office and you can feel the vibe of what's going on in the office. You can see what's going on. You clearly do get to understand that buyer differently when you're together. So I agree with that, but I think that's still going to be challenging depending on, what happens over the next few weeks even, and how comfortable people are from a buying and a selling perspective being together. So I think that's going to be hard. But what I will say is vitally important, which hasn't changed, and it speaks to what you were just commenting on around the basics, is kind of preparation is key right now. These conversations, these interactions are precious, and you can't kind of fly blind like we used to do, where you were kind of read something on someone's LinkedIn page and then roll into a meeting, right? Because you could pick up a lot of cues when you're in a face-to-face meeting. So your preparation has always been important, but it was a little easier to kind of fake it when in the olden days, I think. And so your investment in the preparation, we know that distinguishes seller performance, right? But your preparation and your thoughtfulness around each of those conversations, knowing they're really precious, and you might lose someone, in 5 minutes on a Zoom or whatever it might be, the need to perform and make an impact is that much more paramount. And I think that's changing and getting harder and harder. But you can prepare your way through that if you're thoughtful about it. I think.
Great points. Are you, is Emissary doing anything for face-to-face kickoff?
We are debating it, right? So like everybody else, we're going to kind of see how things are. I have this craving, urging need to be together, right? Like, again, that gives me the energy. We have people that we've hired that have never met each other, obviously, or never seen each other in person. And I just came back from a leadership meeting in Boston where we brought the leadership team together, and many of them hadn't even met each other face to face. So there's this craving need. But I think we're gonna hold for right now. We have the benefit of having a fiscal year that ends at the end of January, so I can kind of plan that a little bit later. And maybe we do something different where it's not the typical year kickoff that you do around a sales kickoff, but you do something different to celebrate the year a little bit later, and allows you to kind of capitalize on the momentum in a way that's different than what we've done in the past. Who knows? Like, we're in the same boat as everybody else, right?
Jim Sullivan, who's on our sales community advisory board, did a face-to-face back, I'm gonna say 2 months ago or so in Boston, and he obviously kind of like anybody had no idea people could opt out, but he just said that he was very impressed with the people that came, were responsive.
Yeah, we're all humans, right? We're humans, and we've been sitting in these same spaces for 2 years now. So I think that human interaction, both from a, collaboration with your colleagues, but also from a seller perspective and buying, like, we're all craving that human connection. It is what it is. We're all doing the best we can, right?
Yep, absolutely. All right, Tucker, you're putting a couple up. I missed the other one. So from Colette, very insightful conversation. Appreciate that, Colette. And from a LinkedIn user. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jeez, sorry. Who doesn't love a student of sales like Allen? Dynamic person and highly articulate and intelligent sales professional.
Wow.
So on that note, let's talk about what does sales intelligence mean?
Oh, wow. Great segue. I don't know who this person is, but they need to get on my Christmas list here quickly. So thank you for that. So, we've been talking around this whole time, right? So it's a great segue into talking a little bit about Emissary. Everything we've talked around the sales tech stack space, really important. We subscribe and invest in a bunch of those. But as I said, at the end of the day, selling is still a human interaction, right? You're still relying on a human dynamic to connect, right? And so what we've seen is this, this need for that human connection and that guidance. So Emissary is a super cool business. Imagine you again, in the old days, you go in, you sell to one person, they make a decision, what have you. Now you're selling across multiple buyers. You don't know the process. You don't know who's involved. You don't know, how they're going to make a decision or evaluate. So imagine if you had a user or you had a coach, guardian angel, or whatever you want to call it, that sits on your shoulder, that is able to coach you through that whole sales process from top of the funnel. How do you prospect? How do you break into an organization? How do you navigate? How do you think about white space? How do you expand opportunities, deal size? How do you navigate an organization to expand relationships? And how do you work through procurement? And the only way to really get that information is from an individual that has worked in that organization. So our emissaries are a curated network of 9 to 10,000 or so Fortune 2000 executives who have recently left the buying role in the organizations you're trying to sell to. And they are available to help coach your sales team on how you work across your whole funnel, but also the marketing team as you think about field marketing and lead gen and demand gen and ABM campaigns. And it's an incredibly powerful proposition because they are providing the information that isn't publicly available anywhere else, right? How does the organization make decision? What's the dynamic across the leaders? You walk into a bake-off and you may know who the people are in that room, but you don't know their interpersonal relationship. You don't know how they evaluate. You don't know what else they have going on that's important. But someone that has worked in that organization that recently left does understand that and can help coach you on how to navigate and win. So it's incredibly powerful. I wish I'd had it my whole career. I kind of looked at Emissary and I said, where have you been my whole life when I was trying to hit my own quota? But it's incredible how powerful it is.
Yeah. And when you say recently left, that is within how long?
Yeah, for us, so the parameters for an emissary, so we call our advisors emissaries, which makes sense, generally have left their role within the last 18 months. There are some roles where, based on the organization or, whatever might be happening in the context of that organization. They might be very relevant for a long time. We have a CIO that was the CIO of a really, really big CPG organization. Everybody would know who that was. And that organization doesn't change that quickly. That dynamic doesn't change. So their information is still very, very relevant about how they make decisions and how they buy and everything else. And that gentleman has been gone from that role for a while, but most of them are 12 to 18 months.
Yeah. And there's a impressive list, as we've done some, client calls, a bunch of different examples, but there's one we had done recently with the ex-executive from State Street, but it is really amazing how kind of getting that inside kind of scoop around the value prop, around the positioning, it's a big company. Hey, here's some other, there's
exactly
silos they can go sell, right?
Yeah. And everything that we've been talking about before, now sellers are really flying blind. So we've got great resources and I believe in all of the AI, scraping, information that is out there. We believe in that. But without, again, the human intelligence of how that organization operates and makes decisions. And at the end of the day, these are companies of individuals and humans, right? You have to know their individual motivation. You can't find that from public resources. And so we see it around, it's incredible to watch the impact around pipeline velocity and everything else, deal growth and everything, especially, as individuals try and navigate procurement even, right? So, you never know from a seller how much power procurement has. Can they kill their deal? Can they, are they there to just sign the deal and get 10% off or 20% off or whatever it might be? You just don't know unless you've got someone from the inside coaching you. And that's what an emissary does.
And then are you able to do things, say, by industry, right? So if somebody's
absolutely
vertical, going after vertical, how does that work?
Yeah, really, really great question. So most of what Emissary does is connect sellers or marketers with our advisors so that they can have an interaction to pick their brain about everything that they would need to know about selling into that particular, their former company. But more and more, we'll use the advisors to do a sales kickoff. For instance, we were just talking about this, where you want someone to come with industry experience that was your buyer, that can counsel you on how you think about selling and navigating to that role or to that segment or that industry. We do that a lot. We're starting to do more and more kind of custom research where organizations want us to survey across a community of advisors and provide kind of bespoke research services for them based on, what we can learn across our advisor community. There's all kinds of opportunities. We'll have organizations that are thinking about a new product launch and they'll want to use an advisor to test a pitch deck or test how they want to approach the market. And they'll do that as dry runs or role play or what have you. There's all kinds of ways that you could use that type of coach.
Oh,
for sure.
That's great. And then are there things that sales reps or the leadership that's on kind of learn in terms of kind of other tips and tricks?
For sure. I mean, it's a lot about the contextualized selling opportunity, right? So you're trying to sell into FedEx or Starbucks or Amex or Cargill or Comcast, whatever it might be. And so it's really contextualized to, your selling situation. And so the power that you can learn around, how to navigate your offering and win is really a big part of the value proposition. But what we're seeing more and more is from a leader perspective, as you look at your staff or your sellers that are working across these emissary conversations, we provide, transcripts and notes about those conversations. And so you can start to see trends across buying behavior or selling behavior for your teams and how they action against the things that they learn through those emissary calls. So we're doing more and more of that, which I think is really powerful for a sales leader as you think about coaching your own people and how they take action with, the information that they've learned through those calls with an advisor is really, really, really important.
Wow. And then how do you source the emissary advisors?
Well, it's a great question. That's kind of our secret sauce. So I'm not going to share too much, but we do have a team that is constantly out looking. We've got some triggers and some notifications that are always looking for folks as they change over in those roles. So we're monitoring across a bunch of different systems and technologies to see when those role changes happen. Also, there are times where you might say, listen, I'd like for you to go find an advisor based on these criteria. And we can go out and look for that for you from an individual perspective. But for the most part, we're constantly monitoring and watching the turnover in these roles so that we can capitalize on those moments. And and what's great is from an advisor perspective, if you've just left one of those roles, you want to be relevant. You want to capitalize on your experience from that time. So people always ask me, like, why would an advisor do it? We pay them what we pay them per call, which is great and compelling. And if I said you don't have to do anything but show up for a call and we'll give you a few $100 or whatever it might be, that's pretty interesting for folks, but they still want to feel relevant. They want to capitalize on the experience, of where they've been. They also still feel very tied to those organizations. So, as they're thinking about, in our case, a lot of times technology solutions, like they're using this as an opportunity to pre-vet those for their peers that are still, at those companies. And a lot of people are trying to think about, putting out their own shingle and thinking about their own consulting business. And this is a great way for them to start to build a beachhead for a different business for them. So it's really powerful, and you'll see us, continue to expand our advisor community as that's really important, obviously.
Yeah, that's amazing. You said what, 7 or 8,000?
Yeah, I mean, generally we run between 9 and 10,000, depending on how long they've been with us. But we have this incredible team that's like I said, constantly out looking and managing those relationships, and why someone would want to work with Emissary as an advisor, and what's in it for them, again, which is a great experience. But we generally are adding 400, 500, 1,000 a month into our community. So we're adding them in, taking them out, depending on their relevancy.
Wow, and that would represent how many kind of end user companies?
Oh, good question. We really are focused right now on kind of what we would say the global 2000. So looking at, key buying personas across the global 2000, because for the most part, for our customers, our clients that are using Emissary, they really want to rely on them where they've got a complex sales process, right? So it's helpful if you've got a transactional sales team for a bunch of obvious reasons. But if you have a really complex, big multinational organization where it's really difficult to navigate the buying process, that's where our emissaries drive a ton of value. So we focus on the recruiting of the emissaries on those biggest companies, because everybody and their brother is trying to sell to Starbucks and Walmart and FedEx and Cargill and Amex and everything else, right? So that's where we focus.
That's great. So you have, if I had of the global 2000, then you might have what, 1,800, 1,900 kind of.
Oh, almost cover it. We have coverage in pretty much all of them.
Wow. That's amazing.
Probably, I think last we looked was 99% of the Fortune 1000, right? Wow. Some of them are smaller companies. Well, not smaller companies, but, from a private company perspective, those roles don't turn over. Like, we capitalize on the turnover of leadership roles, right? Yeah. And some of those just culturally don't, turn over very much. Which not to say that we can't find an advisor in them, but for the most part, we've got coverage on every company you can name.
Wow.
In that 1,000.
Do you ever have, so my example, say if somebody had left State Street and they're now at Fidelity, would that person still qualify as an emissary on behalf of State Street as an example?
They would be the emissary for State Street, right? So we wouldn't ever ask them to provide any guidance as an employee of Fidelity about selling to Fidelity, right? But if they left Fidelity and went to State Street, like, we'd want to talk to them about Fidelity. So it really is capitalizing on the knowledge and their experience of their prior role, because that's what's most valuable and easy. We get questions often about, how do people govern NDAs and things like that. And, our guidance and counsel is like, they're not sharing the secret sauce of the strategy of that company, right? They really are helping you think through the individual personas that you're trying to sell and navigate around, right? So it's very protected from a, NDA perspective. And so it really works for us in sharing that, again, that human intelligence.
Wow. What about international? I assume there's more kind of North America centric as opposed to.
Yeah. So about 80, I would say, give or take, about 80% of our advisors are in North America, but we've got exploding advisors communities across APAC, APAC-J, all across EMEA for sure. And some of that is, as most of our clients are multinational global organizations, a lot of times we start in North America where they're trying to sell into big, complex North American organizations. But as every company is thinking about deal expansion and account expansion, we're adding more and more advisors internationally that can help. But a lot of times, even a domestic advisor can counsel you on, their former peer that was in, EMEA or APAC or wherever it might be, right? They don't necessarily have to have been in that market region to provide guidance or intelligence about how that market region operates. They know it. They worked across it. They were matrixed into it often. And so they can be very helpful from that perspective too.
Oh, that's great. And then besides that initial call, what happens in terms of kind of follow-ups and I'd say additional information as part of that kind of
Great
advice?
question. Wow, great question. So, what we see is that, and what we would counsel is, you need to have a call with an advisor when you're at kind of that pivotal moment in your sales velocity, right? So you're prospecting, and you're going into that first deal. You just need to get smart, right? You make it past that stage. You're going to the bake off. You need to understand the 10 people that are there. Like those key moments. You absolutely want to have a call with an advisor at those moments before you go in blind, right? Everything that we just said. Preparation is key. You got to know the human intelligence elements of what you're dealing with. So we recommend that. More and more, we're making some pretty significant investments across our content offerings, right? So how do we codify and syndicate the knowledge that's in the heads of these advisors? So if you're an SDR, for example, role near and dear to me, having done that a long time ago. But if you're an SDR and you're trying to prospect into an organization, you probably aren't going to speak to an advisor for 45 minutes, right? But you just need to get smart on that organization really quickly. We can document that into buying profile play sheets that we're starting to generate that, are available through our Emissary platform. You just can get smart on them quickly, right? So that's a great use case. And you'll see us deliver more and more content to support our offering over the coming year. So that's a really important element as we round out, how we think about this knowledge that these advisors have and make it usable for our community.
So in terms of, I'll say, dovetailing on the lead gen that you do internally for yourselves, do you have, from a sales perspective, things that if hey, people that are coming to your site, the personas, there's, Zoom info, seamless, people like that, but, kind of how do you get your own contacts for people that you're going to go sell to?
For us personally, for Emissary, for ourselves, well, we use those resources too, right? We use those resources too, but we also use our Emissary network, right? So like we use our own network to help us in our own sales pursuits, right? So we've got a handful of them that we will talk to say, hey, we're stuck here, we're trying to navigate there. We use it all the time ourselves. So we use a lot of the same technology that we've been talking about to provide kind of contact information, but we definitely use our own network for ourselves because it works and it's very effective.
Oh, that's great. And when we're talking about the tech stack, I don't think we kind of, you may not know the details of all that, but kind of any of the tech stack that you're using or things that either you have now that you love or things that you're looking at for the future.
Yeah. I mean, I probably don't want to go into too much of any one technology or another, right? So like you think about the CRM.
You love everybody.
I do love everybody, right? Of course. But you think about, we love everybody. But you think about obviously the CRM space, and then you think about the sales intelligence space. I think that's really, really, really important. And then you might be looking at some things that might give you propensity to buy information based on AI scraping. That I think is also really, really interesting. So I personally think about those. And then there's all kinds of things from a marketing perspective, whether it's outreach and some others, of how you think about communicating. All of that is really important, but it's got to be grounded in the human intelligence, right? Which is what we're talking about here. Because in order to be effective with any of those other technologies, you gotta play the right card, and you got to say the right thing at the right time to the right person, right? And the only way you find that is through a coach that knows how that organization operates. So
that's great. And then with your sales process, are you doing anything? A lot of companies are, the ideal thing is not to have a heavy lift, not to have to do the heavy selling. So kind of from a PLG perspective, any things that you're doing to kind of maybe slim down the offering, so to speak, to do anything there? Or do you see that you're continuing going to be, what I'd call not a heavy lift, but kind of, enterprise sale yourself on the kind of interactions in terms of your sales team, what they do and how they do it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably all of the above, right? So I don't know that I would see that really, really changing. I think what we see, and this might not be in direct answer to your question, but I think what we've seen over the last year, as far as the process and methodology of selling is, every organization is asking for, and everybody that's in the sales tech stack space understands this, like the need to have some experience with your technology or your offering, right? So some type of like pilot experience, what have you, like we do that because people will come to me all the time and say, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing, prove it. And they get on one call with an advisor and it changes the trajectory of their deal. So we believe in that too. And I think you see that across all the other offerings. And how do you manage that experience as part of your sales motion, because that is still part of your sales cycle, is I think the critical game for people to figure out, and that you don't lose momentum in the relationship if that ship, tips over to another team to go deliver on. I think that's really an important part of the life cycle of your sales motion that I think companies are still figuring out.
Oh, that's great. Really exciting. I just looked at the clock. Time flies when we're having fun.
I know.
Any kind of closing comments?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity, both to talk from a sales perspective and the evolution of the space, but also obviously I love what we're doing in Emissary. So I'm grateful for the time, Randy, and being connected to your community. And it's certainly an impressive community and a lot of organizations that we respect a ton. So I'm just happy to be here. So I really appreciate it.
Gotcha. All right. So the LinkedIn user says, maybe my iPad is hiding my ID. Either way, my comments are sincere about Allen, her incredible energy and insights. Merry Christmas, Rick D.
Thanks, Rick. We'll connect on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. We'll connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah, might be Rick Diana. But anyway, so this is Randy Seidel with Sales Community. Had an awesome session here with Allen Mueller, the CEO of Emissary, and certainly wish everybody the best for the holidays. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Randy.